We have new details tonight in a heartbreaking story out of Newcastle.
Tonight, people are gathering here at Riverfront Park in Newcastle in honor of 18-month-old Iris Alfera.
It's just horrible. This is something that shouldn't happen to anybody.
If you prioritize the safety of the vulnerable, do not disengage. Follow this report to its conclusion for life-saving intelligence. Visualize a child lost in the rhythm of dance. When the music hits, the entire world fades into pure bliss. Iris Rita Alfera embodied that spirit. A simple educational program was all she needed to radiate joy to her surrounding environment. Our objective today is not to inflict unnecessary trauma or dwell on the inherent tragedy of the situation. Rather, we are analyzing how this specific failure triggered a legislative overhaul designed to safeguard future potential victims. We will surgically examine the systemic fractures and overlooked red flags to arm you with tools for early intervention. This investigative debrief serves an educational purpose, reconstructing the sequence of events with forensic precision. Utilizing legal transcripts and expert profiles, we will identify the subtle indicators of a deteriorating environment. One strategic inquiry or well-timed intervention is often the only barrier against a fatal outcome. Before initiating the briefing, endorse this report and join our network. Log your operational location and current time below. The urgency is clear. We are documenting the testimony of a victim whose voice has been permanently silenced. Increased situational awareness translates directly to enhanced protection. We operate as the primary advocates for those who lack the capacity to speak for themselves. Commencing debrief. On December 2nd, 2021, in Butler, Pennsylvania, the subject entered the world. They christened her Iris Rita Alfera. Despite the midwinter chill, the atmosphere within the family unit was absolute radiance. Iris entered a world where her presence was not just expected, but desperately anticipated by every primary contact. Emily, her mother, found a sudden, profound shift in her personal mission the moment she held her daughter. Grandparents Frank and Candace were present for the debut, witnessing the arrival of their first grandchild. A moment that fundamentally redefined their understanding of devotion. Profiles suggest Iris was naturally predisposed to joy. She bypassed typical infant irritability, greeting every dawn with a smile. Her gaze was remarkably observant, possessing a depth of curiosity that seemed to illuminate her entire countenance. Her presence altered the room's frequency. The initial phase of her life was defined by an ironclad circle of protection. Her grandparents maintained a secondary safe house, where Iris was consistently the central focus of all family operations. Between the constant supply of provisions and the perimeter of protective relatives, she was never without tactical, emotional support. Though small in stature, her psychological footprint was massive, featuring signature pigtails that signaled her high-energy persona. Emily treated her daughter's wardrobe like a seasonal mission, ensuring she was always properly equipped and presented. From festive autumn themes to vibrant spring attire, the visual evidence confirms a child who was meticulously nurtured. Sustenance was more than a biological necessity. It was a ritual of social engagement and primitive communication. She navigated mealtimes with playful intensity, often attempting to share her rations with the adults in her life. Those morning routines and small rewards have now become the primary evidence of a life once filled with normalcy. The first 12 months were a series of tactical successes, from the initial crawl to her first tentative maneuvers. Each breakthrough was logged as a victory by a family that viewed her as an unprecedented marvel of nature. She was the pioneer of a new generation, the high-value asset at the heart of the entire extended family unit. The dynamic between mother and daughter was airtight. Surveillance of their history shows they operated as a singular unit. They communicated through a sophisticated non-verbal code, an intuitive connection that only develops under deep maternal attachment. Emily served as her primary guardian, her anchor, and her ultimate sanctuary. For her first anniversary, The perimeter was secured for a royal tier celebration involving a massive network of supporters. Images of her covered in birthday cake represent the peak of what appeared to be a perfectly insulated childhood. Does this belong to you? Affirmative. I'm executing this mission purely for the sake of the family unit. However, even the most stable domestic environments contain vulnerabilities. Relationships with the biological father, Bailey Jacobe, had fractured. They were attempting to establish a joint custody framework to manage the child's development across two separate sectors. Her primary base of operations remained with Emily and the grandparents, though she frequently deployed to her father's residence. It was a standard protocol for split households, built on the fatal assumption that both environments were equally secure. By 8 months, Iris had evolved from a passive infant into an individual with distinct psychological traits. The subject's primary psychological fixation was centered entirely on Miss Rachel. The moment those familiar opening chords resonated, Iris abandoned all other activity for total focus. To her, the vibrant animation and rhythmic sequences were a private stadium tour. Her movement wasn't mere swaying. It was soul, deep. It was a complete kinetic manifestation of joy. Where there was sound, Iris was in constant, fluid motion. She would stomp her tiny feet and nod, scanning the room to ensure her audience was witnessing the performance. Her grandfather served as the primary observer, validating her every movement with rhythmic clapping. Investigative profiles reveal a child of extreme emotional warmth. She operated without any physical boundaries regarding affection. She would anchor herself to her mother, burying her face as if seeking shelter. These brief, silent intervals provided Emily's psychological endurance. Tactile feedback was her primary comfort language. Her drive was relentless, a perpetual engine of boundless energy. She interrogated her environment, probing every drawer and shadow. High cognitive engagement. She possessed a rare, silent rapport with animals. The household pets were her confidants. Soft touches followed by bursts of laughter whenever they acknowledged her presence. This evidenced a naturally empathetic temperament. Even at 18 months, her emotional intelligence surpassed all expected developmental norms. Her laughter functioned as a powerful social contagion, a resonant, guttural sound that forced a visceral reaction from everyone nearby. It defined the acoustic atmosphere of the Alpha residence. Her grandmother noted the residents felt unnervingly silent in her absence. Then there was the water, her playground of choice. She would saturate the environment, thrashing until the floor was flooded and she was lost in foam. 30 minutes of pure immersion, with nothing but heat and plastic toys. In these mundane intervals, her true essence was most visible. Her core personality radiated with maximum intensity. The primary descriptor used by all witnesses was light. Iris Rita Alfera possessed an unmistakable internal glow. She didn't just occupy space, she fundamentally altered its frequency. A picture of health and thriving development, standing on the precipice of a vast, untapped future of infinite possibility. The domestic status of the father, Bailey Jacobe, began to shift. He established a new residence on Electric Street with one Alicia Owens. This logistical change dictated that whenever Iris was scheduled for visitation, she was introduced to a foreign ecosystem dominated by a maternal substitute who was not her kin. Alicia Owens, age 20. The external optics suggested a typical young woman assuming caretaking duties for her partner's offspring. To the untrained eye, there were zero behavioral red flags. No immediate indicators of a latent threat. The Newcastle residence blended perfectly into the suburban landscape. But internally, the power dynamics had shifted for Iris. The secure perimeter of her mother's home had been breached. She was now exposed to an unvetted environment. Shared custody forced her into weekend transitions. For Emily and her family, this created a baseline of persistent, justified dread. They adhered to the court mandates, operating under the dangerous assumption that biological ties guaranteed safety. The psychological climate on Electric Street was fundamentally different. In her mother's home, She was the solar center. Here, her status was diluted by the presence of a psychological outsider. Entering the role of a step-parent is a delicate operation. In this instance, something malignant was gestating beneath the surface. While the child was vulnerable, sleeping, or playing an occupant of that house was conducting a specific type of digital reconnaissance. Not queries regarding nutrition or milestones, but data acquisition of a far more sinister dark variety. A digital footprint was forming a hidden archive of morbid intent stored on a smartphone, completely undetected. No one in her inner circle suspected a thing. April 2023 brought a critical incident that should have been the final warning. Iris required emergency medical intervention. Clinical findings were impossible. Inside the digestive tract of an 18-month-old, they discovered foreign objects that defied accidental ingestion. Multiple foreign bodies were recovered. An inventory of hardware that, individually, posed a lethal threat to her internal systems. The medical team struggled to reconcile the physical evidence with any plausible accidental scenario. Oral exploration is a standard developmental milestone. It is expected behavior for a subject of her age. However, the nature of these items exceeded the bounds of curiosity. These were objects intended to be kept entirely out of reach, items specifically isolated due to their high-risk profile. Yet, somehow, they had been introduced into her small system. The family unit shattered under the weight of the discovery. Emily was left searching for a logic that didn't exist. Frank and Candace sensed a fundamental shift, a psychological red flag they couldn't quite identify. They interrogated the facts, but every lead hit a dead end, leaving them in a fog. Post-treatment, Iris returned. Her physiological resilience proved far more robust than her small frame suggested. She resumed her routine, smiling and dancing, mimicking normalcy. Yet, for the observers, the psychological scar remained raw. Surveillance increased. They kept her close. Still, the central enigma of the breach remained. How did a toddler penetrate the hazard perimeter? This failure triggered an automatic administrative review. Child and Youth Services, CYS, was mobilized to execute a formal field investigation. Their objective was to analyze environmental hazards and quantify any ongoing threat to the subject's well-being. Field agents executed site visits at both the maternal residence and the Electric Street location. They vetted the residence, conducting interviews and tactical sweeps of the space. The assessment yielded no actionable evidence of danger, forestalling any emergency extraction of the child. The Bureau accepted the theory of infantile exploration, a tragic yet seemingly random mishap. Lacking a smoking gun or clear chain of custody, the legal apparatus could not act. Visitation remained operational. For the maternal unit, this decision was a catastrophic failure of intelligence. They felt the infrastructure had failed. Frank was convinced a target must be held accountable. He demanded a thorough, deep-dive forensic analysis. But the court operates on evidence, and currently, the data was insufficient to revoke custody. Candace lived in a state of high alert, her internal alarms screaming during every transport. It was a visceral, reptilian response to an invisible threat, a certainty that danger lurked nearby. Absent a court order, they were forced to concede, watching her depart and praying. As the family processed trauma, the digital footprint at Electric Street expanded. The suspect device remained active. Conversely, the search queries were evolving, becoming surgically precise and specific. No one was monitoring the traffic. These forensic crumbs would eventually map the crime, but only after the clock ran out. June 2023 opened with deceptive, quiet, standard summer conditions. Civilians in the streets. While others planned retreats, the Alpha file was approaching its most devastating and final chapter. Iris proceeded with her scheduled visitations. To an outside observer, operational status appeared green. Within the walls of the Electric Street residence, however, a dark transformation was underway. The subject's environment was being manipulated in ways that defied external detection or standard supervision. Post-mortem analysis would later reveal the presence of foreign chemical agents within the subject's system. These weren't household items found by chance. These were high-risk, controlled substances requiring deliberate access. The methodology of how they entered the 18-month-old's body remains a haunting question. The solution lay buried in digital forensic data waiting to be decrypted. By mid-June, the baseline shifted. Emily noted the subject was returning from visitation appearing compromised. She wasn't showing classic pathology, but her cognitive and motor levels were trending downward. Emily attempted a behavioral assessment, but the subject lacked the verbal capacity to report abuse. The father, Bailey, either missed the warning signs or delegated tactical care to his partner, Alicia. The domestic hierarchy was built on silence. Observations were suppressed. Questions were never voiced. June 25, 2023. Bailey exited the perimeter, leaving the subject under Alicia's supervision. It was a routine handoff. One guardian mobile, the other maintaining the post. Zero indicators of crisis. Bailey stood in the checkout lane, securing the subject's rations. He likely anticipated a positive reception, focused on the immediate future at home. Perhaps he visualized the standard bonding routine digital media and shared laughter with the characters. The facade of normalcy was about to shatter. His comms lit up with Alicia's name. Bailey picked up the phone, anticipating a routine exchange milk, bread, or an estimated time of arrival. The voice on the other end shattered that normalcy. Alicia's tone was frantic. Something was wrong with 18-month-old Iris. The report was a standard domestic accident, a tumble from the bed, but the aftermath was chilling. The toddler wasn't responding. Abandoning his shopping, he raced to his vehicle. The transit home was a blur of adrenaline, those few minutes feeling like a lifetime. Stepping inside, the scene didn't track. The child's state was inconsistent with a minor fall. The physics of the trauma didn't add up. Her movements were unnatural. Her silence even worse. No crying, no recognition. A deep psychological alarm went off. Dispatch logged the emergency call at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Code: unresponsive minor. First responders were on site within moments. Their clinical eyes immediately flagged the discrepancy between the story and the symptoms. Emergency protocols were triggered, leading to a high-priority medevac to UPMC Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh. Emily's phone rang a notification that serves as every parent's ultimate psychological breaking point. Accompanied by Frank and Candace, the family rushed to the trauma ward, where specialists initiated a full battery of forensic and medical testing. The diagnostic data returned with a revelation that defied all expectations. Toxicology flagged foreign substances in the girl's system. This wasn't a pathogen or a gravity-induced injury. This was something else. Medical staff pressed for a timeline of exposure. For 4 days, the family maintained a vigil in that sterile room. Amidst whispers of nursery rhymes and desperate prayers, the biological toll of the exposure became too great for her system to bear. On June 29, 2023, Iris Rita Alfera took her final breath, encircled by her grieving kin. 18 months of life ended right there. The vibrant, dancing toddler was now just a memory captured in a still frame. The room went cold. A profound, heavy silence filled the space as Emily cradled her child, trapped in a waking nightmare. In that moment, their reality fractured into two distinct eras, the world with Iris and the hollow one that followed. Discrepancies between the autopsy and the initial report forced the medical examiner to alert law enforcement. Gravity didn't do this. The clinical conclusion was inescapable: homicide. Someone had deliberately orchestrated the end of this child's life. Westmoreland County detectives moved in, conducting interviews and isolating the key players within the household. The forensic search moved to the digital realm. When they cracked Alicia Owens' smartphone, the investigation hit a dark goldmine. The browser history provided a silent, incriminating narrative of intent. As early as February 2023, the device was used to research methods of biological harm against a minor. This wasn't curiosity, it was a manual. Methodical inquiries into the toxicity of common household chemicals. Queries focused on pediatric vulnerabilities, how specific pharmaceuticals could compromise a developing body's internal systems. Even after a prior emergency room visit in April, the dark curiosity persisted. The pattern of behavior didn't break. It accelerated. While the child fought for her life in a Pittsburgh intensive care unit, the digital activity continued, devoid of any remorse. The search terms shifted toward evasion, how to beat a polygraph. To the prosecution, this was the smoking gun of intent. For the Alferas, it was a crushing realization. The digital breadcrumbs were there, ignored until it was far too late. Had the intervention occurred following the April incident, the dancing would never have had to stop. This case study isn't just about loss. It's a stark reminder of the necessity of hypervigilance and gut-level intuition. Frank had sensed a misalignment in the environment, a psychological friction he couldn't quite name. Candace lived with a persistent dread, yet lacked the forensic proof required to halt the visitations. Archive this briefing. Disseminate this data to your network, especially those tasked with the guardianship of minors. Report your thoughts below. Were you aware of this breach? And where do you see the failure in the protective infrastructure? Your engagement ensures this briefing reaches a wider audience. Recognizing behavioral red flags is the first step in prevention. That awareness is often the only line of defense between a child and a predator. Our investigation continues, focusing on the ensuing courtroom battle and the legislative shifts born from this tragedy. By January 2024, 7 months post-mortem, law enforcement moved in. Alicia Owens was formally detained. The indictment cited criminal responsibility for the death and severe endangerment, backed by a mountain of digital forensics. The accumulated data points spanning months of premeditated queries sketched a portrait of calculated malice, not misfortune. Recognizing the flight risk and the gravity of the crime, the court ordered her held without the possibility of bond. For those Iris left behind, it was a hollow victory. A degree of accountability, yet an irreplaceable loss remains. Emily, Frank, and Candace stood as silent sentinels in court, speaking for a child whose voice was permanently hushed. Emily swore a vow. Emily has dedicated her existence to overhauling the statutes, ensuring that Iris's memory is never erased from the public record. The state anchored its prosecution on a singular, heavy concept: the fundamental duty of care. Forensic specialists testified that an 18-month-old cannot accidentally ingest the toxins found in her system. Digital evidence systematically dismantled the defense's accident theory. As of 2025, the judicial process continues its slow grind through the legal system. While awaiting a final verdict, the family accepts the cold reality of their loss. They chose to transform agony into a tactical weapon. Hundreds assembled for the final farewell, a sea of purple, her signature color marking a moment of collective mourning. Michael, the patriarch, gave his word that his great-granddaughter's name would never fade into obscurity. He honored that pledge. From this tragedy, Iris's Law was born, a legislative strike aimed at overhauling child protection protocols within Pennsylvania. The logic is straightforward. Should a guardian introduce a convicted criminal into a child's home, the other parent must be legally notified. This mechanism creates a critical window for intervention before a situation crosses the point of no return. The statute also tightens accountability for social services. Whenever a minor is hospitalized under suspicious or questionable circumstances, similar to the incidents Iris faced that April, the file can no longer be closed after a single perfunctory visit. The protocol now demands aggressive action. A local shrine has emerged, overflowing with toys of her favorite character, Miss Rachel. Iris's army has mobilized thousands demanding reform. The digital rallying cry, #JusticeForIris, speaks for victims silenced by tragedy. They gather here to ignite candles and release balloons, sending a silent message into the atmosphere in her memory. Iris's tragedy leaves us with one haunting, visceral lesson. Never ignore your intuition. Frank sensed the shadows. Candace felt a gnawing dread. Yet, without hard evidence, they were powerless to halt the scheduled visitations. Now they understand that a gut feeling is a survival tool. Iris Rita Alfera's life spanned a mere 18 months. She was a toddler who danced to Miss Rachel, possessing wide eyes and a smile that radiated pure warmth. Her death was preventable. Her spark was extinguished, but her legacy lives in laws designed to safeguard other children. Thousands of citizens have now been trained to spot behavioral red flags. Parents have adopted a posture of extreme vigilance. Caseworkers are finally asking the hard questions. Frank believes if her story spares a single child, her brief life attains meaning. This specific case file may be closing, but the broader investigation into child safety continues indefinitely. Monitor this briefing and activate alerts. Each entry provides tactical insights to identify imminent danger before it strikes. Distribute this report. Document your reactions below. Serve as the mouthpiece for the victims who have been silenced by horror. Iris lived to dance. We must continue that movement through action and constant vigilance. We appreciate your attention to this matter. Remain alert and protect those within your inner circle. She was only 18 months old. She danced like the whole world was her stage. She smiled like she had never known a single dark day. Her name was Iris Rita Alfera, and her life was stolen before she ever had the chance to grow. This is not just a tragedy. This is a warning. Every red flag that was felt but not spoken. Every gut instinct that was doubted. Every moment the system chose paperwork over a child's safety. They all added up, and a little girl paid the price. The people who loved Iris knew something was wrong. They felt it. But without proof, they felt powerless. We cannot let that happen again. Iris's law now stands as her legacy, demanding transparency in custody arrangements, mandating action when a child is hospitalized under suspicious circumstances, and holding every guardian accountable. Her dance was cut short. But her story doesn't have to end in silence. Trust your instincts. Speak up. Protect the ones who cannot protect themselves. Because sometimes, a single voice at the right moment is the only thing standing between a child and the unthinkable.